Okay, I'm going to try and do this quickly because I've already done it once and it went over 15 minutes and YouTube won't let me post a video over 15 minutes. So we're going to try and do this fast. Um, this week was actually kind of entertaining. There were a few things that went down, most notably a game I will spend most of the video talking about. We're going to start out, though, with Temple. Temple beat Eastern Carolina on Thursday. The reason I bring this one up is not only were they ranked, which is a first in a long time for Temple, but Temple now starts the season 7-0. The first time in school history they've ever started 7-0. So they're off to the best start ever for this team, and it's a great time for the university. The next game, Duke, number 23 Duke at Virginia Tech. I thought Virginia Tech would play Duke well, but I didn't think they'd give them this much trouble. This game went to quadruple overtime, where Virginia Tech scored a touchdown in quadruple overtime, but missed their two-point conversion, where Duke followed that up with a touchdown and their own two-point conversion to win the game 45-43. Next was Clemson, number 6 Clemson at Miami, Florida. Clemson beat Miami, Florida, and beat them miserably, 58-0. This is Miami's worst loss in school history, and it is also the loss that got their head coach fired. So they're now part of the coaching carousel. The next game of importance, well, not really the game's important, but something that happened in the game is important, is number 2 Baylor's game against Iowa State. Baylor beat Iowa State much in the way I thought they would, but in the process they lost their starting quarterback to a fractured neck bone. So he's going to be out probably for the season. One of the other games that didn't go quite the way I thought it would is number 3 Utah at USC. I thought USC coming off 2 straight losses, one to Notre Dame, their rival, the other to Washington, a conference loss for them, their second conference loss on the season after losing to Stanford earlier, and Utah was undefeated. I thought Utah was going to roll through this one, but USC came back hard. They showed up, they went after this Utah team, and I got to tell you, Utah looked overwhelmed the entire game. I think this may put them out of the playoff picture entirely. Okay. Now that that's out of the way, on to the main attraction. Number 9 Florida State at Georgia Tech. This game was exciting from start to finish. It started out with a field goal from Florida State that they got after getting an interception that set them up at the Georgia Tech 16-yard line. But Georgia Tech followed that up with a drive of their own that ended in a field goal. So they go into the second quarter tied 3-3. Where Florida State gets another interception that sets them up at the Georgia Tech 2-yard line. Now this time, Cook runs the ball in for a touchdown, so they go up 10-3. Now, look at it this way: Florida State's up 10-3 on Georgia Tech right now, but their scoring drives have consisted of 14 yards gained and 2 yards gained, so total of 16 yards gained on scoring drives up to this point. They remedied that with a long drive of about 60-plus yards that ended in a field goal for them. I believe 60-plus. Don't quote me on that. But they got a field goal to go up 13-3. Now at this point, I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, well, at least Georgia Tech gave them hell for the first quarter or so. Because this is looking like Florida State's going to start running away with it. But Georgia Tech, especially since Georgia Tech starts their next drive at their own 6-yard line, like 94 yards, they're not going to get that done. Well, they did. They got out to their own 40, and then their quarterback pulls the ball, runs it himself for 60 yards, and gets the touchdown. This brought them back within 3 points, and left Florida State with 2 minutes and 20 seconds to try and respond. And respond they did. They got another drive, moved down the field to go up 16-10. So they go up 16-10, and this proved to be the last points that Florida State would score in the game. Georgia Tech got the ball to start the second half. Their drive in the second half moved them down the field. They stalled out inside the 4 to 30-yard line, kicked a field goal, brought it back within 3 points. Now, Florida State's first and only drive of the third quarter, because the first drive for Georgia Tech was 6.5 minutes. Uh, Florida State's first drive of the third quarter was 16 yards and a punt. So they punted the ball back to Georgia Tech, who moved it down into Florida State territory again, taking 6 minutes and 45 seconds to do so. However, they get inside the 30 again, only to go backwards and backwards and backwards and have to punt. So they have to punt the ball to Florida State, but it's now in the fourth quarter. Something happened on the punt, though. Georgia Tech player got driven into the ground, and then when he tried to get up, the Florida State player wouldn't move from over top of him, so he took that as a sign of aggression and started pushing the Florida State player. This got him a flag. I don't think both parties were innocent. I don't think it shouldn't have been a flag on the Georgia Tech player, but it probably should have been a flag on the Florida State player as well. He was trying to prevent the Georgia Tech player from getting up, and it should have been flagged. It wasn't, however, so Florida State starts to drive at their own 26-yard line as opposed to their own 11. They start moving it down the field really, really well. They get to the Georgia Tech 9, so they have a first and goal from the 9-yard line. They start moving it forward, then they go back, and then they end up with a 3rd and 10 at the Georgia Tech. A 3rd and goal at the Georgia Tech 10. This is where Everett Golson threw his first interception as a Florida State Seminole, his first of the year. Georgia Tech gets and it really wasn't his fault because the ball started bouncing around. It hits off his receiver's hands, off a couple Georgia Tech players, and then one of them pulls it down. So it wasn't really his fault, but still an interception is what's going to go down as in the stat book. Georgia Tech gets the touchback. They managed to move the ball out to their own 40 before they have to punt again. Now there's only about 6 minutes left in the game at this point. It's 16-3 still, and it's looking like Georgia Tech may be running out of gas. But Florida State doesn't burn any time, barely burns any time off the clock, has to punt the ball back to Georgia Tech, who gets it at their own 38-yard line with 4 minutes and 20 seconds left in the game. They start off poorly on the drive, ending up in a 4th and 6, their own 41-yard line. Not exactly where you want to be when you're trying to get a game-winning field goal, a game-tying field goal, or maybe a game-winning touchdown. But they do convert they go for it on 4th down, because at that point in the game you just have to. It's 3 minutes or so left in the game, and you're down. You don't get many opportunities to score. You've got to score. Well, they go for it on 4th down, and their quarterback completes a 36-yard pass, his longest of the game, to get the first down and put them in field goal position. Now they run the ball a few more times, run down the clock, get it in just inside a minute as they kick the field goal to tie the game at 16. So it's now 16-16 with 54 seconds left. The kickoff for Florida State goes through the back of the end, goes for a touchback. So Florida State has 75 yards to go with 54 seconds left. Now, they don't need to go all 75 yards. They just need to get in field goal range, which would have been about the 35-yard line, I believe, for their kicker. They start moving the ball pretty well, and they get it down to they start moving it into Georgia Tech territory, and that's when they start having troubles. They stall the drive out with 6 seconds left in the game at the Georgia Tech 38-yard line. It's a 56-yard field goal. Certainly something that they believe their kicker can do, and since their kicker had never missed a field goal in the fourth quarter in his entire career, they were fairly confident in him. So they send him out, and he goes to kick, and the ball gets snapped. He goes to kick the field goal, and since it's a long field goal, it has to be a low one to get the distance, and one of the Georgia Tech players gets a hand on it. So it's blocked. They're not going to get the kick. They're going to go to overtime, but it goes rolling forward. It goes to about the Georgia Tech 22-yard line. Now, when I played football, I was always coached that if that happens, you stay away from it. It's like a punt. Because if you touch the ball, the other team can pick it up and run it for the touchdown and potentially win. However, the Georgia Tech player noticed something that the Florida State players had all started moseying around. They didn't hear the whistles yet, so he does a split-second decision, picks up the ball, starts running to the other end of the field where all his guys are, and they all have the wherewithal to turn around and start blocking for him. So he starts running down the field. He makes the kicker miss. He makes another guy miss, and he gets into the end zone for the go-ahead walk-off touchdown. Georgia Tech wins the game 22-16. They shut out Florida State in the second half. Was an amazing finish, and it's so interesting to have two finishes of that caliber on the final play of the game with time expiring, where both teams who won the game didn't have the lead in the game until the very, very end. That's two games like that back to back. The Michigan State Michigan game last week, the Georgia Tech Florida State game this week. It was a very fun finish to the week, and it snapped Florida State's 28-game ACC win streak, and it also gave Georgia Tech their first ever win over a ranked Florida State team while they were unranked themselves. So that's how the interesting games went this weekend. As far as how I did this week, let's see. I had 40 of 56 games called correctly this week. That's 71.4% for me. It's not bad. It's keeping it around the right level. As far as the games that matter, I had 15 of the 19 ranked games correct this week, which is one of my higher percentages since about week 1 and 2. But week 1 and 2, they were all playing Little Sisters of St. Mary, so it wasn't really hard. My overall for the season, in terms of all games, is a 76.98% correct rate. That's 398 of the 517 games played correct. Now, of the top 25, in 8 weeks, there have been 158 games involving top 25 teams. Of those 158, I have 127 correct. That's an 80.4% right rate. I feel like I'm doing pretty good. Let me know what you guys think. If you like the video, click the like button below. Subscribe. Still waiting, I believe, on my first subscriber, so could be you. Let's do this. So let me know in the comments below what you guys thought. And I will see you tomorrow night for the predictions for week 9.